Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about learning. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, "Hi Frederick, I don't know where I can post my question for one of your prospective videos. That's why I decided to put it in a comment here." I'm sorry about that, guys. Usually, yeah, just put them in a comment on a video, or you can send me an email or something like that. Like I'm not very good at, well, I haven't really put any effort into informing you how to do this thing, but a comment on a video is fine. I usually read them every morning. I would like to hear from you what to do for being proactive and always keep learning the learning curve high enough as a software engineer. Sometimes we find ourselves around experienced tech leads who we learn a lot from without much effort, but sometime later we gain experience and those genius people seem to be disappearing. What to do to keep learning at the same pace that it was in the beginning? Appreciate your response in advance. Well, I'm gonna make you sad and say that keeping your same learning pace as you do in the beginning is going to be impossible usually, because the reality is that just as with anything that you gain mastership of, I like to sort of look at it as climbing a mountain, where in the beginning usually you have an easier time to make a lot of headway because the base of the mountain is usually more climbable than, say, the top, if we're talking about, one of those typical cartoonish mountains. But the higher up the peak you get, the more narrow the passing becomes and the more difficult it will usually be for you to make any sort of headway, or it might get steeper and so forth. So and it's the same thing when you're like an athlete or something like that. The fitter you get, the closer to the edge or to the limit of what you can physically do you're gonna get. In other words, you have to work harder for less, even though by comparison, you're probably far ahead of most people. It's the same thing with learning a skill and so forth. The thing that is beautiful, I think, about learning as opposed to doing something physical where it's just about, well, it's sort of just about muscles, right, or stamina and etc., is that even if you might not be able to say just endlessly, if we think about this in a very one-dimensional way, where you just sit down and you learn, say, CSS or HTML or something like that, and you just, in the beginning you get all these insights, you learn all these tags or selectors or things like that, or if it's backend, like you learn how to use a database, etc. At some point, as I said, you will stop getting those insights that you continuously are getting in the beginning because, as I said, you're getting higher up the mountain. But here's the thing that is very beautiful about learning as opposed to just doing something physical, and that is that you can creatively apply yourself to other areas, which gives you a compounding effect on the thing that you already know. Let me explain that a little bit to you. So, as an example, like there has been a few people have been asking me about, and this is a very common notion, which is like, I'll tell you why this is interesting. So the idea for a lot of software developers is that if you specialize on front end or back end, you're going to be better at one or the other. And this notion comes from the same basic idea as I was saying about sports. If you practice tennis, you're going to get really good at tennis, but you're not going to be so good at, say, bicycling or swimming or something like that. And the idea is that if you learn both tennis and swimming or something like that, then you're going to be a little bit worse than the people who only focus on tennis or the people who focus on just swimming. Conceptually, if you compare yourself to professional athletes who dedicate their entire lives to one single thing, sure, that might be true. But here's the thing. Even we haven't seen a lot of these people in our day and age, and I'm not an expert in sports, but there are athletes, if you compare not at the leading edge peak Olympic level, who can do more than one thing and still be better than another athlete at both of those things. Basically, what I'm saying is that for example, if I played tennis and I just played tennis, I will be beaten by a professional tennis player by today's standards, and that person, even if they do just a little bit of swimming, they're probably going to be better at it than me as well. Because this idea that and this is sort of the quality thing, right? You think that if you just make that investment, you're equal in every way. No, actually not. Some people are better at things just overall than you are ever going to be. And it's unfair and it sucks, but it is the reality. And the same thing is true for software development. So the people who have this idea that they're just going to focus on backend or just going to focus on frontend or some niched area, what they do is, as I said, they will get to a point where they've learned quote unquote as much as they can. Some people have like the talent, have real insane talent and push it to an edge where like it's hard to understand how good they get at something. But when you when you get closer to the peak of the mountain that you're climbing, whatever you're trying to learn, what you can do in order to just maintain an overall healthy learning curve is to diversify yourself a little bit. And that's the thing that I'm talking about when I say you can creatively apply your learning in more than one area. So an example, if you take me now as a reference point, where today I have a direct involvement in most things front-end related. I have a direct involvement, and we're not talking like I have people helping me with this. I'm doing this on behalf of people in multiple areas where like I collaborate with, I work with the people, I lead the people who are actually supposed to be doing this full time, and I do the architecture and similar sorts of things and help out with all of these sort of things that you would expect from someone who only does something like that. I'm not going to go into a comparison match, but I'm saying is that because I diversified my way of thinking about what I need to learn, I can work across the entire stack. And that means that I can do the Java, if it's Java, C#, it doesn't really matter what it is. I can sit with the backend developers, I can pick up all their stories, and I can do their work. In some cases, I'm going to be better at it than some of them. In some areas, they might be better at it than I am, but I can do it. Same thing with frontend. And what I want you to understand is that to keep up like a steady learning curve, I think that you should switch your focus from trying to just figure out how to continue learning and start thinking about what is it that you actually want to be able to do. Now, I want to be able to build an entire digital system. I want to understand everything related to how to build that thing. And that is something where you can't just slice that up and say I'm going to do everything at the same time. That's going to take too long. So you have to start doing some parts and then realize that when you get to a point where you can sort of stably do, well, if it's API development or something like that, you can do that easily enough, then you should start looking at climbing another mountain. You're not going to lose anything, which is this, as I said, it's sort of this idea that people have that if you're an athlete, if you stop doing the sport, you're going to get worse at it. Sure, maybe a little bit, but when it comes to learning, if you really have understood it, it's a little bit like riding a bicycle. Even if you stop for a little while, if you just ever so often check in again, you're going to retain the thing that you have learned, and it's going to compound on you, because now, by today's standards, as I said, I can do something that most of the back-end developers or front-end developers and so forth, like when I have a conversation with front-end developers, I have a problem because I know all the things related to the back-end and I forget that they don't, which means that when I start talking about how to set up their environments and Kubernetes and like all the things they need, basically running a full DevOps operation, they kind of go, yeah, but I still can produce as fast when it comes to front-end development and so forth and so forth. And the same thing goes for the back-end developers. So my flexibility and my ability to think about problems becomes broader, if that makes sense. And that's the thing that I suggest that you do. To focus on not trying to retain some type of learning curve or something like that, but try to widen your understanding of all the areas that you need to understand in order to gain the results that you are looking for. It depends on what you want, of course, but that's something that will be a recipe for success for most of your life. At least that's what I will argue. So what I want you to take away from this is that if you want to continuously learn, even if you start slowing down, as I said, look at it a little bit like climbing a mountain. So you simply climb as far as you can until things starts to slow down or it doesn't feel like you're getting so much from it, and then just put a flag up there, because you have now reached that point. You don't have to push it until you don't, because you don't know what the peak of the mountain is. But what I can tell you is that if you start diversifying a little bit, you will have a compounding effect, because as I said, this idea that you will give up something just so that you can do something else and suck at it is not necessarily true. You retain the things that you remember and that you have done to a point where you have mastered them, basically. And that will reward itself, because today, for example, I can do a lot of things that most of my peers cannot. And that's not because they're unable. It's because they have focused on one area or two areas or so forth, and I have focused on other areas. And we still have overlap where we both know how to do certain things and so forth. But what I'm saying is that if you learn how to creatively apply your learning process, you will simply diversify. And that doesn't mean, as I said, that you will just get worse at stuff. It means that you will just accumulate a wider set of skills. And if you have the aptitude to learn these skills, you will find that in some cases, some people are going to be better than you, but in many cases, as I said, it's not like that. It's not like just because you did front end for a little while when you used to be a backend developer that all the backend developers just went up past you, because it's, as I said, it's the same thing with the climbing the mountain, where you are making headway in learning front end at a rapid speed. If they're at your same level and you were at a high level of experience at that point, they're not going to progress all that much. The gap that they are going to go upwards, if you think about it conceptually, is not going to be all that wide. So when you come back, maybe they're a little bit higher. Some of them are not even going to continue, because not everybody keeps on pushing forever. So you don't have to think about it that way, I argue. Think about it instead as diversifying. And when you diversify, you can basically maintain, because your skill set is like an onion. You just add layers to your understanding and knowledge, and before you know it, you achieve something similar to what I'm talking about, where you can basically do anything. I'm not going to claim that I am there in every area, but I've gotten far enough in that area, whereas today, where it basically becomes a question of, it's hard to figure out what to learn next that is still relevant to my job. And now I have to start thinking about, right, things that might be outside of what I desperately need to know in order to do basically everything in web development, because I've reached that point now due to this process. So you keep on learning until you gain a level of mastership. Then you might look at other things. You can come back and continue your learning, because you don't really know. Like, learning is not just something that's linear all the time. Sometimes it stops off and then you go and do something else, and you come back with new experiences from some other area, and then you can make even more progress. Or you notice that, well, actually, if I combine these ideas, I can start doing something completely different. That's why it's so rewarding, I think, to diversify a little bit with your learning. Have a great day.